So at the end of the video, you saw a couple of examples, and that should have been one of the things that you just mentioned on the last slide about how the spheres of Earth interact to form a whole system. Something like the water cycle is an example that you're really familiar with that actually winds up involving all of the four spheres of Earth. Another one that we're going to look at here together is like a volcano. A volcano happens when magma from underneath the Earth or melted rock pushes up to the surface. That involves the geosphere because you actually have rock being pushed to the surface of the Earth or to the geosphere from underneath the Earth. Those volcanoes release gases like carbon dioxide and methane into the air, which would affect the atmosphere. That new gas is now in the Earth's atmosphere and going into clouds and evaporating. Once those clouds burst and produce rain, now that gas is part of the the hydrosphere, because it involves all of the water on Earth. So as that rain falls, it may be acid rain, it may be ash that's falling with the rain, it is part of the hydrosphere. When it lands back on Earth, now it's becoming part of the biosphere because plants are going to absorb that rain and use it to grow. Now, there could be chemicals in that rain that cause those plants not to grow very well, or there could be nutrients in that rain that help those plants grow. But that is an example of how a volcano is also part of all four spheres interacting as a whole system. We're going to look ahead at Mars. We're going to start making some observations about a completely different planet based on these four systems we've seen. So what you're going to have a chance to do is actually take a few minutes and explore the surface of Mars yourself using a program called Google Mars. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information before we start that, though. So two things you'll need to make sure you know are landforms and elevation. A landform is any feature that forms on the surface of a planet. You know these as mountains, channels, dunes, canyons. Any of those things would be considered a landform. They can be on other planets as well, like the ones you'll see on Mars in a few minutes. Elevation is something that's going to be really important to pay attention to in your sim. Your elevation is how high above sea level a landform is. So the higher you climb a mountain, the higher that landform is, or the higher the elevation of that landform is. If you were to go into like the Grand Canyon, you're now going lower in elevation down into that landform. So here's an example of plenty of landforms, and you can see the different elevations they have. Something like a volcano is going to have a very high elevation. A mountain will have a high elevation or a divide. Something like a strait or a river or channel or a delta will have a much lower elevation. So these are the kind of things you're going to be looking for on the surface of Mars. Now, in order to use that program, you're going to actually go to Google Mars, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. When you click on the link in your slide, you will get to a page that is going to look like this. And it's going to look very colorful at first, and you might not know what these colors mean. But what you're going to have to do is look down at the bottom where we have an elevation key. So we can see what these colors mean for our elevation. Yellowish, greenish is about sea level, or like nice even zero elevation. If it goes further down, it would become more green or more blue, possibly even purple. So places like here and here have a lower elevation, also through here. As we get higher up, we start to see a kind of darker red, and then all the way into like a blackish gray, and then a white. And the higher up it is, the more white it becomes. So places like this would see a much higher elevation. So what you're going to have a chance to do is explore these landforms on Mars. Take a few seconds and see if you can make some observations and write them down about what you see on the surface of Mars. If you are having a hard time and you want to actually see some landmarks yourself, you can check up here and look for things like mountains, and it will actually point out some famous mountains on Mars. If it has a green little tab here, that means that you can click on it and it will show you another view or a closer picture. You can also click on that picture and it will take you to an article about that section. You don't need to do that, but you could spend a lot of time actually looking at several different landforms here. You could look for craters or ridges, canyons. Any of those are places that you could look and try and get a closer look at those actual things by clicking through them. So you could actually see some of the canyons that are formed in the surface of Mars. So you're going to go ahead and go through Google Mars right now. Take about 5 minutes or so. You don't need to go much further than that. And when we come back, we're going to actually share some things that we saw together.